Thank you, everybody, for joining. Tonight, we have Dr. Fran Rowe, a veterinary nutritionist from Mad Barn, speaking about equine nutrition. Dr. Rowe completed her bachelor's degree at Roanoke College and went on to obtain her doctorate of veterinary medicine at Virginia Tech. Dr. Rowe spent 3 years in equine private practice prior to joining Mad Barn in 2023. She is a certified professional animal scientist through the American Registry of Professional Animal Scientists, which signifies her commitment to science-driven, ethical practices in animal nutrition care and management, and her adherence to top professional standards in this field. So without further ado, Dr. Rowe, I'd like to hand it over to you. If you want to introduce yourself further than that and get started, that'd be great. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Rachel. I appreciate it. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I am going to move away from this Zoom screen. So I won't be able to see any of you guys or any questions that pop up or anything. But just if something's not going right with my slides, just holler and signal for me to take a pause there. But otherwise, like Rachel said, we should have plenty of time for some questions at the end of the presentation today. So, okay, so we'll get started. Okay, so I'm really excited to introduce you all to Mad Barn for those of you who might not be familiar with us, and then discuss some of the high points of formulating diets for horses at different stages in their life. So kind of per the theme of this equine series, kind of talking about, all the different life stages for our equine companions, wanted to touch on kind of everything from growing all the way to golden years or senior horses. So thank you for the great introduction, Rachel. I'm Dr. Fran Rowe. You can call me Fran, and I'm one of the veterinary nutritionists with Mad Barn. Rachel summed it up pretty well here, but I guess I'll give just a touch more background on myself. I'm originally from Virginia, and my background in horses comes from the eventing and fox hunting world. And I did go to Virginia Tech for veterinary school and then completed a 1 year equine medicine and surgery internship at a practice in Pennsylvania before joining a small equine private practice in central PA. So I'm now kind of permanently in Pennsylvania. And after a couple of years in private practice, I was really presented with this wonderful opportunity to join Mad Barn as a nutritionist, and the rest is history. I guess I just kind of completed my 2 year anniversary with Mad Barn, which time flies. It definitely does not feel like it's been that long. So in my role as a nutritionist at Mad Barn, I really love being able to help horse owners help their horses, and really doing so by making these manageable changes to their horses' diets. And it's really rewarding to have clients come back to me with positive updates and seeing their horses thrive with, something just as simple as, making some small dietary changes. So, for the first part of our talk today, I wanted to take the time to introduce you guys to Mad Barn and then highlight a few of the really great free educational resources that we offer. And then in the second half, we'll dive into kind of the main topic of discussion for today, which is approaching nutrition at different stages in a horse's life. So, to start off with Mad Barn's mission, quite simply, our mission is to improve the wellness and longevity of all types of horses. That can be anywhere ranging from our really high performing elite equine athletes to our, just kind of pleasure horses that are in work, but maybe not doing a very elite, elite job, all the way down to kind of our pasture pets and companions, and even our donkeys. We don't forget them. And I always have to give a shout out to our amazing team. I just feel really very fortunate to work with a really highly qualified and dedicated group of people. So, as a company, I really like to describe us as a bunch of equine nutrition nerds. We all share this common interest of improving the welfare of equine companions and our equine athletes with a real passion for all things nutrition, of course. And so everyone in our kind of customer facing roles, so that's everybody on our nutrition team and then everyone on our customer service team, we're all horse enthusiasts and have lifelong experience in the equine industry. I always really like to highlight this fact because what it means for you guys is that when you reach out to us, you know that you're going to speak to somebody who understands the ins and outs of horse ownership. Okay, so we're really able to put our mission into practice in three key ways. The first is funding and conducting research projects that have a direct impact on equine welfare and equine management. The second is developing new technologies to enhance our ability to balance diets. A really good example of this is our open access advanced diet formulation tool, which I will introduce to you guys a little bit later in the talk. And then third is providing education and support to owners and industry professionals, just like you guys, like we're doing today. So what are some of the free resources that we offer? The first resource that I always like to highlight is our free diet consultation service. So you can submit your horse's diet through our online diet evaluation form or schedule a phone consultation if you prefer to chat kind of one-on-one over the phone. Both avenues will connect you with one of our nutritionists who will review your horse's diet information and then offer recommendations to balance the diet or potentially address any specific concerns that you might have. And you can easily do this online, get scheduled, or submit the evaluation if you go to this Analyze Diet button on the website. Our other resources and tools can be found under the Learn tab at the top of the website. And for any of you guys who are keen to do a bit of a deeper dive into equine nutrition and advance your knowledge, we do offer an equine nutrition course. So this course is 5 modules covering the basics of everything, kind of starting from the kind of beginning to build a foundation on nutrient digestion and metabolism, determining vitamin and mineral needs for your horse, how to formulate a diet and kind of what considerations go into that, and then also touching on some specific diet related conditions like gastric ulcers and laminitis or metabolic disease. And as with all of our resources, this course is completely free and you can complete it on your own pace. We also offer a self-serve nutrition calculator if you're interested in assessing your horse's diet on your own. Kind of in pairing with that, we also maintain an extensive feed database and feed comparison tool. Really, that's just designed to help owners easily look up nutrition information for different forages or feeds or supplements, etc. And then you can use the comparison tool to actually look at products side by side. And if there's, something that you're specifically wanting to evaluate, this just puts it in an easy to read way. And we're always adding and updating the feed database. So never hesitate to email us if you're searching for something and don't see it, or if you search something and potentially see an error, or companies will update their formulations, things like that. So definitely let us know if there's anything we need to add or update. We also offer a few tools to help owners make informed decisions on management and exercise. So these include our heat index and air quality tools, which will provide real-time results for your area if you input your zip code on either the heat index or the air quality index for your area. And then it'll also include an interpretation for any level of risk. Is it low risk, or is it moderate risk or high risk, and what that might mean for you and your horse. And then we also have our newly launched sweat loss estimation tool, designed to help riders with their recovery and electrolyte replacement plan post-exercise. And then the last thing I'll highlight, I know I keep going on here, the last thing I'll highlight is our extensive library of articles. So we have over 500 peer-reviewed articles on a variety of topics on our website, anything ranging from nutrition topics to management to performance to diseases, everything in between. And we're adding to it constantly. We have a really great team of writers and editors who are dedicated to providing top quality content for you guys. Okay, so that's kind of my, in a nutshell, introduction to Mad Barn and some of the resources we have for you. But now let's shift gears and discuss the main topic for today, approaching equine nutrition for different stages of life. So all horses have the same basic nutrient requirements, regardless of their age, their exercise routine, or other stage in life. So all horses need energy, they need protein, and they need certain vitamins and minerals. Energy is the fuel the body needs for survival, for growth, building muscle, and to perform exercise or perform activity. Horses get their energy from consuming different, what we term energy substrates, which can be carbohydrates, fats, and protein. They can also receive energy from the microbiome or the microbes in their hindgut, which produce volatile fatty acids or VFAs, which can be absorbed out of the gut and then used for energy as well. Protein can be used as an energy source, though it's not the preferred energy source by our cells or our horse's cells. But it is specifically necessary for building muscle and other tissues in the body. So protein, when it's ingested, gets broken down into its building blocks, which are called amino acids. And then those amino acids are incorporated into other protein structures throughout the body. Vitamins and minerals play numerous and really diverse roles throughout the body. I mean, gosh, we could have an entire presentation on just that alone. But they're necessary for anything from tissue structure to enzymatic reactions to energy metabolism to neurological health, so much more, everything in between, and truly every body system requires these nutrients in some way, so they are essential. And when we think about our what vitamins and minerals are important or relevant for our horses, these are the macro minerals, the trace or micro minerals, and the vitamins that we look to ensure are supplied in adequate amounts when balancing the diet. All right, so we talked about what nutrients every horse needs, but the amounts that they need are going to depend on several factors. So in order to determine an individual horse's nutrient requirements, i.e., how many calories does that horse need per day, how much protein does that horse need per day, etc., we need to know that horse's signalment, or what you can kind of think of their demographic information. So at Mad Barn, when we are collecting information as part of our diet consultations, these are kind of the 6 key pieces of information that we like to collect to get all of our background information that we need on this animal. So we ask for their breed, their sex, their body weight, age, their physiological status, which is really just a fancy way of kind of categorizing them by kind of what their job is or what their life stage is. So that could be, is the horse growing? Is this horse in exercise? How much? Is it a pregnant mare? Is it a lactating mare? Etc. And then it's also really helpful to know if this horse has any special needs or special concerns, which we might be able to address through some dietary changes. So once we have all the necessary information, we can determine a horse's individual nutrient requirements and then compare those requirements against what's actually being supplied in their current diet. MadBarn has developed a platform that allows our nutritionists to really efficiently and quite accurately evaluate the horse's diet. And this is our open access advanced diet formulation tool called MadBarn Feed. So if you submit a diet with us, you'll automatically get created an account in MadBarn Feed, and then we will give you access to that, and you can, go in and play in it. And it's there's a bit of a learning curve to learning it, but it is available to anybody who wants to use it. So in this screenshot, I know the text is really small and I apologize for you guys, but in this screenshot, the total amount of a particular nutrient supplied in the diet is highlighted by the the yellow column. And then the daily requirement for that particular nutrient is then highlighted in the blue column. And this allows us to directly evaluate whether that horse's diet is indeed supplying enough of that nutrient or if it's not. And if it's not, it will be indicated either by, let me see if I can use my little laser pointer here, be indicated by either this D, which means deficient, or if you're looking at these bar graphs, if it falls below this dotted line at 100% here. So as a note, when we go through balancing a diet, we are frequently aiming to see many of these nutrients, whether it's protein, vitamins, minerals, etc., exceed that minimum requirement or that 100% threshold. And that's just because established guidelines, which our model is based off of, really reflect the bare minimum needed to prevent deficiencies. But optimal health and performance often require supplementation above those levels. So, if you ever see a nutrient level and it's well above 100, that you might think that's concerning to be like, oh my gosh, it's way too much. But that's where some of the nuance comes in with balancing diets and nutritionists, where we have that training to be able to determine, what levels are safe and appropriate and kind of what our targets are to meet optimal diet balance. Okay, so let's actually see how nutrient needs might change throughout a horse's life with a case example. Really, it's going to be 3 case examples, but but this is Riddle. He is a thoroughbred gelding. And we're going to look at how we approach his diet when he's a yearling versus when he's a mature horse in exercise versus when he's a senior horse that's retired. All right, so starting with Riddle as a yearling, his current body weight is around 700 pounds, and we're estimating that he'll mature to a fairly average 1,100 pounds. He is a growing horse, which that is his the category that he falls into when we are looking at physiologic status. And then lastly, at this point in his life, he's young. We don't know him very well at this point, but he doesn't have any special concerns yet. So there are a few key considerations to keep in mind when formulating a diet for the growing horse. One of the most important considerations, I think, is that growing horses have elevated nutrient needs to support growth and development. Another is that inappropriate diets at this age can contribute to the formation of developmental orthopedic disease, such as osteochondrosis dissecans or OCD. So, for example, excessive carbohydrate intake, suboptimal protein intake, vitamin and mineral imbalance have all been implicated as risk factors that increase the incidence of OCD. So whenever I approach the growing horse diet, I'm taking really special care to ensure that I'm mitigating this risk with proper balanced nutrition. And I wanted to highlight a few of the differences in nutrient requirements for a growing horse compared to a mature horse at maintenance. I know there's a lot going on in this table, and we're going to break it down. But in this table, we're looking at the daily requirement for select nutrients for an immature horse at 3 ages. We've got 6 months, 12 months, and 18 months. And this growing horse, just to keep things consistent, is predicted to mature to a body weight of 1,100 pounds. And then on the right-hand side of the column, or on the table here, you'll see this column, which is our comparison. It's our mature horse of the same weight, 1,100 pounds, at maintenance or idle. So the first thing I want you guys to note is that the mature horse at maintenance has a lower energy requirement than a 12-month-old foal, even though a foal at this age is, half the size of his mature counterpart, right? So growing foals have a relatively high caloric need. It's imperative that energy is adequately supplied in the diet, but without being excessive. So excessive dietary energy can result in more rapid growth or these alternating periods of kind of growth spurt and then maybe a plateau or stagnant growth, etc. And that has been shown to increase the incidence of OCD or other DOD, as I already mentioned. Similarly, note how the mature horse at maintenance has a lower protein requirement than a 6-month-old foal. Also note that protein requirements are highest in our growing foals around 12 months of age. So one of the biggest challenges I face when working with growing foals is meeting this really high energy and high protein demand. And this is because, on the one hand, you might say, gosh, well, why can't we just, feed them more protein, right? This is because we're limited by this foal's dry matter intake, or their DMI. And the DMI is essentially the amount of food a horse of a given size and physiological status is expected to consume per day. Because foals are smaller animals, they can't eat as much dry matter as an adult horse. So this is something, it's a little bit of a hard concept to think about sometimes until you really start to sit down and do the math, but it's really important to highlight, and I wanted to bring it up here because it means that every meal, every bite of food that foal takes, it has to be extra nutrient dense. It has to be even more nutrient dense in order to deliver that amount of energy and protein that they need. And so that's one of the real big challenges we face when feeding the young horse. Another thing to note is in our table here is how the mature horse at maintenance has a much lower calcium and phosphorus requirement compared to the growing foal. This might not be wholly unexpected, but it's because during growth, calcium and phosphorus are needed for skeletal maturation. So, i.e., growing long bones and growing those developing joints. And then lastly, I just wanted to take note of the trend in zinc and copper requirements. So you might look at these and say, sure, the absolute amounts here are of these trace minerals, as well as, this kind of follows trend with some of the other vitamins and minerals we talk about. But you look at these and you see that they, the absolute amounts are lower than our mature horse at maintenance here. But the relative amount required for these, for the growing foal at different ages, it's actually quite high if you consider the foal's body size. And again, that kind of loops us back into our conversation about dry matter intake. But you can really see that around 18 months of age, those requirements start to plateau, right? They're starting to approach, what would be our requirement for the mature horse at maintenance. And that just really underscores that growing foals have a relatively high micronutrient need to support growth and development. So it's imperative that we ensure that the diet is supplying adequate amounts of vitamins and minerals to support healthy musculoskeletal development. In particular, I highlighted zinc and copper here because they are really important for growing joints, and that kind of loops back into our discussion about ways that we can mitigate the risk of OCD. Okay, so how can we feed Riddle as a yearling to ensure he's meeting all of his nutrient needs? Here's an example diet that would be suitable for Riddle at this age, and we'll kind of break this down. So there are several aspects of his diet that are well suited for the growing foal. As much as possible, I try to focus my diets around forage, even for our young horses. And so this diet is forage focused, right? We've got pasture, we've got 2 types of hay, and then we've got some forage-based commodities making up his daily meals. And we're actually able to supply adequate amounts of energy and protein without the need for a concentrate or a traditional ration balancer by incorporating nutrient-dense commodities like the alfalfa, the wheat bran, and oil into the diet. This diet is also appropriately balanced in vitamins and minerals. In this example, we're using Mad Barn's vitamin and mineral premix called unnamed and a little extra table salt to meet baseline vitamin and mineral needs. And we're also ensuring that the calcium to phosphorus ratio of Riddle's diet is appropriate by using a balanced ratio of alfalfa, which is a forage that's rich in calcium, and wheat bran, which is rich in phosphorus. So not all growing horses are going to necessarily need extra calories from fat, which is what the oil in the diet is. And that's particularly true if the forage quality is above average. So if you've got really good lush pasture, you've got really high quality hay, that extra oil or extra fat might not be necessary. However, if some extra calories are needed to just help support that growing foal, and keeping them at a good body condition as they're growing, oils are a really great option to reach for. We always recommend being mindful of using high carbohydrate concentrates or high carbohydrate commodities for growing foals, as excessive carbohydrate intake can lead to rapid growth, and that's one of those risk factors for increasing the incidence of OCD. All right, so that's baby Riddle. So now we're going to move on to Riddle as a mature horse. So he's now 12 years old. He's in regular moderate exercise. He's in good body condition, maintaining his weight well at about 1,100 pounds. But a special concern for him at this stage in his life is digestive support, as he is prone to gastric ulcers. And I think that is a very common special concern that we see in our performance horses, our exercising horses. So in some ways, performance horses are similar to growing horses. They have elevated nutrient needs to support their level of work, just like growing horses have elevated needs to support growth. However, our focus shifts slightly. We're going to be looking at, or we care a little bit more about certain nutrients and then kind of shifting our focus on how we deliver that. So it is important to ensure the performance horse diet supplies enough calories and protein to fuel exercise, right? But we also want to be mindful of how much our reliance on high carbohydrate feeds in the diet. So it's not uncommon to see exercising horses or performance horses on kind of a substantial volume of grain, which they, are being used for the extra calories, or if they need the extra calories for weight maintenance. But this can negatively impact gut health in sensitive horses, not all, but in sensitive horses. And additionally, the lifestyle of our performance horses is often, demanding, and it can be high stress, and that can further exacerbate digestive issues. So ultimately, our task here is to balance those elevated nutrient needs, that elevated need for energy and protein, whilst with maintaining a gut-friendly diet. And then I kind of alluded to this already, but certain vitamin and mineral needs increase with exercise, but for our performance horse, we're particularly mindful of our electrolyte balance and then our antioxidant intake. All right, so again, I'm just going to check my time here. Okay. Again, I wanted to highlight a few of the differences in nutrient requirements for an exercising horse compared to a mature horse at maintenance. So in this table, we're looking at the daily requirement for select nutrients for a mature horse at 3 levels of exercise. We've got light work, moderate work, and heavy work. And then staying consistent with our discussion so far, this is for a horse that's 1,100 pounds. And then I mentioned this a few slides ago when we were talking about Mad Barn feed, but it is worth noting here that, or just worth noting again, that the trace mineral and vitamin requirements, listed here or listed in our formulation tool are based on NRC guidelines for what's needed to prevent deficiency. And intake to prevent deficiency does not always equate to what is considered optimal intake to support health and performance. So we are frequently looking at kind of supplying over what's listed at baseline. So just bear that in mind. All right, so first thing I want you guys to note is even a horse in light work has a much higher energy requirement than its counterpart at maintenance. And monitoring your horse's body weight is a great proxy for estimating if they're getting enough energy or getting enough calories in their diet. So if you are increase your horse's exercise level, you go from maybe, minimal exercise over the winter and then ramp back up in the spring, and your horse starts to lose some weight after the workload increases, that's a great clue that energy needs bumped up, right, to support that horse. But if you increase their workload and they are maintaining their weight very well and that's not a concern, then there's no need to change anything, even though we know technically, their needs change. But every horse is an individual and their metabolisms are all a little bit different. So some can handle that, some can't, and we can adjust their diet accordingly to support that. Similarly, protein requirements also increase the more work the horse is in. And just one thing I like to note about or kind of talk about with protein is kind of a common trend that we see, and that's that many owners assume that when their horse is struggling with top line or struggling with muscle development, it means that they're not getting enough protein at this stage, right? We're talking about mature horses or exercising horses. However, we actually don't see this very often. When we actually plug in all the data and look at the numbers, it's really quite uncommon for us to see diets that are truly low in protein at this stage. So the average diet will supply ample protein for horses really up into moderate work. Maybe for our horses in heavy plus work, we might be falling a little bit short, but really for our horses in moderate work, the average diet will supply enough, and that's particularly true if the horse has access to even just mid-quality pasture and hay. So in this type of scenario, I'll often approach this concern by maybe supplementing key essential amino acids, something like lysine, which you can see here, rather than upping total dietary protein as a way to kind of maintain optimal diet balance. But I also will always address any vitamin and mineral imbalances in the diet, particularly, when we think about muscle health, we think about antioxidants like selenium and vitamin E, as these can directly impact the body's ability to build and maintain muscle. So it's not always as simple as, we just have to up protein. There's a lot more nuance to it than that in many cases. All right, I digress. We'll get back on track here. Okay, so as far as vitamins and minerals go, It's not unexpected to see requirements increase with increasing exercise. I think that kind of makes sense. And I've illustrated that here just with a select few. I chose zinc, selenium, and vitamin E to show you guys. And again, kind of the average well-balanced diet will cover most vitamin and mineral needs for horses, even kind of up through moderate exercise. Similarly to kind of what we just discussed with protein, for horses that are in heavy plus exercise, we might need additional supplementation of specific nutrients to kind of achieve that optimal intake. Good examples would be our selenium and vitamin E. However, there is one nutrient that is often undersupplied for horses in exercise, regardless of the level of work that they're in, and that is sodium. So sodium requirements increase quite drastically with increasing exercise, as illustrated here. So suboptimal sodium intake is probably the most common dietary deficiency that we come across when balancing diets. Luckily, it's very easy to fix by just adding some extra table salt to the diet. The reason that sodium is so important, particularly for our working horses or those in exercise, is that sodium, and chloride are the two primary electrolytes lost in sweat. And so proper electrolyte balance and proper electrolyte replacement post-exercise is really necessary for maintaining hydration and performance and good exercise recovery. Okay, so now, oh gosh, I'm already ahead of myself here. Okay, so how can we feed Riddle as a mature horse in moderate work to ensure that he's meeting all of his nutrient needs? Here's an example diet suitable for him at this stage in his life. And just like before, we'll kind of break this down a little bit. So just like in his yearling diet, this diet remains forage focused and appropriately balanced in vitamins and minerals. We've optimized calorie and protein intake by incorporating, an average performance horse concentrate, and then other commodities like beef pulp and oil. And we've also balanced vitamins and minerals, again, with Mad Barn's Omniety, and then extra table salt to make sure he's getting enough sodium. And then this diet is also suitable for a horse prone to ulcers or kind of, prone to that digestive upset. So Riddle has consistent free choice access to either hay or pasture at all times, depending on his turnout schedule. But he's always got that opportunity to munch. So foraging behavior, or consuming, those frequent small meals throughout the day is really what helps to buffer the stomach acid. So that's why you'll hear that as a management strategy for horses that are prone to ulcers. And then even though we are using a concentrate for extra calories in this example, we're mindful about keeping that volume low. So instead of, maybe using 4 to 5 pounds of grain for Riddle at this point, we've been able to substitute in some more kind of gut-friendly commodities like the beef pulp and, really energy-dense oil for calories from fat as a way to kind of reduce the amount of grain that he needs and then reduce the amount of carbohydrates in his diet to help support his gut. And then lastly, we've included a digestive aid for some targeted support. For Riddle, if Riddle were coming in as a diet evaluation for me, I would be recommending our Mad Barnes Visceral Plus. Alrighty, you guys, I think I'm still doing good. Okay, so all right, so we're gonna move on to our last case example here, which is Riddle as a senior horse. So he's 25 years old and he's now retired, which puts him into that maintenance category as his physiologic status. He's now a little bit underweight, and weight maintenance is a concern for him. He just, as he's gotten older, it's gotten a little bit harder for him to maintain that ideal 1,100-pound weight. And then also some other kind of key concerns for him at this age include his joint health and then his metabolic health. He's an older horse. He's been diagnosed with PPID or equine Cushing's. So at this stage in Riddle's life, we still want to aim to provide him with a well-balanced diet. Just because he's no longer in work doesn't mean we care less about his nutrition. And in fact, good diet and nutrition can really help to extend a senior's life and keep them healthier for longer. So it's important to keep up with regular vet visits with our senior horses so that we can identify health issues early. Some common issues that we see for senior horses that can be addressed with diet and nutrition include metabolic health, joint health, and dental or digestive health. It's also imperative that we maintain an ideal body condition in these guys. Sometimes our senior horses have a hard time keeping a good weight as they get older, like our example for Riddle today. Other times, they get a little chunky when they are, retired and out of regular work. And in either case, kind of a key consideration for us is going to be forage selection and making sure that when we're formulating kind of the best diet to suit that senior specific needs, we are choosing appropriate forage sources to help with weight maintenance. Okay, so how can we feed Riddle? Here's an example diet for Riddle at this stage. And there are, a couple aspects of this diet that make it really suitable for Riddle given kind of his numerous concerns. So we can kind of go through the thought process behind this diet. So we're still able to provide a forage-focused diet, right? We've got, he's got, again, free choice access to hay and pasture depending on his turnout schedule. And we're using kind of forage-based commodities to make up his meals. And these meals consist of kind of higher calorie and higher protein commodities like beef pulp and alfalfa, as well as calorie-dense oil for extra calories from fat, which will aid in better weight maintenance for Riddle. And certainly, you might ask me, gosh, why can't we use some type of grain or concentrate? We can. There are a lot of different ways we can feed a horse that are suitable. It wouldn't be wrong to do. This is just one example of how we can, successfully support Riddle at this age. And then just to note, this strategy of substituting in kind of more shorter fiber length forage options that are easier to chew is a great strategy for seniors that might have worn down teeth and then can't chew long stem hay very well anymore, or they quid their hay a lot. And so that, the strategy just allows us to continue providing a diet that is high in fiber and high in roughage. And then I'll sound like a little bit of a broken record, but again, our diet remains well balanced in vitamins and minerals. If you're paying attention, you'll notice that instead of Omnady, we've actually, Omnady, which we were using in our previous examples for vitamin and mineral balance, we've actually switched Riddle to a different vitamin and mineral called AminoTrace Plus. And the reason for that is that, at least for the AminoTrace Plus, is it's a little bit more fine-tuned to support horses with metabolic concerns specifically. It's a bit higher in magnesium and chromium. So it's still fully fortified. It's still meeting all of Riddle's baseline vitamin and mineral needs, but then we get that little added benefit of some metabolic support, given that he is now a PPID positive. And then lastly, we're also supporting joint health through a combination of MSM, W3 oil, and then maintaining a healthy body weight for him. So if you remember from some previous examples here, we've used the W3 oil previously to provide calories from fat. And we're doing that here as well. But at least with this product in particular, we get the extra benefit of joint support because it's enriched with the omega-3 fatty acid DHA. So the last thing that I just always like to note, especially when we're talking about horses with PPID, is that about a third of these horses will also be insulin resistant. It's not all of them, but it is common enough that they'll be both insulin resistant and EMS or have metabolic disease or insulin resistance. So it is really important to avoid obesity in these guys and just remain mindful of carbohydrate intake, especially if they do cross that line into being IR. Okay, we're coming up to the end here, you guys. Thanks for bearing with me. So I know that was a whirlwind of information. And so to wrap up today, I just wanted to kind of summarize the most kind of common dietary imbalances we see for each category of horse that we've talked about today. So for growing horses, by far the most common issue that we see is low protein and low essential amino acid intake. We talked about how growth is a really demanding life stage and how growing horses have elevated protein needs. So it's really easy to fall short on supplying enough protein during this stage of life. We'll also frequently see calcium and phosphorus imbalance, particularly for young horses on alfalfa-based diets. And that's just because, if you remember me saying, alfalfa is a really rich source of calcium. So if the diet is really heavy in alfalfa, that can kind of throw off our calcium to phosphorus ratio. For our mature exercising horses, by far the most common issue we see is low sodium intake. Again, sodium needs increase really substantially with increasing exercise. So it's just really important that horses receive enough sodium in their diets to support performance and exercise recovery. We'll also frequently see suboptimal intake of nutrients like selenium and vitamin E. Both of these are key antioxidants needed to support neuromuscular and immune health, and many regions of the U.S. are low, or soils are low in selenium, so it's one of those key things that we need to pay attention to and make sure it's supplied in the diet. And then for our senior horses, again, suboptimal selenium and vitamin E intake is frequently noted. I'll also kind of frequently encounter senior diets that are a bit low in fiber intake. And that's usually for those horses that, might not be able to eat hay very well anymore, maybe because of their dentition. And so they're not getting that kind of normal long stub forage anymore. And then that's kind of where our discussion of subbing in some of those shorter fiber length forage options comes in handy. Okay, we're at the end. So I certainly don't expect you all to remember all the numbers and all the concepts we discussed, but at the very least, these are kind of the 3 key points that I hope you guys take away from tonight's presentation. First, and kind of most importantly, is horses have unique nutritional needs at different stages of their life, and each stage has unique needs, and then we can even funnel it down to saying, every single horse is an individual, and each horse is going to have its own set of unique needs and its own kind of special diet considerations. Second is that balanced nutrition can address certain health concerns to support overall health performance and longevity. So don't, rule out nutrition as a really key component of your horse's, just overall management. And then third, my favorite, nutrition is really complicated, and you don't have to tackle it alone. It can be really overwhelming. Take advantage of services or specialists through your local extension office, or companies like us that want to help you and help your horse. So thank you guys so much for your attention, and I am happy to open the floor to any questions with our remaining time. And if we do run out of time, or you don't want to ask a question in front of the group, feel free to email me at this email here. So thank you.
Awesome. Wonderful. Well, before we move into a Q&A, Dr. Rowe, I want to give you a chance to drink some water and take a break.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
I'm going to launch a poll. So if those that are not on iPhones, and if it's a small little screen that pops up, you don't have to do this. I'll send a follow-up email later.
Yeah.
But these polls are really good to know, how we're doing and where you're at. So we really appreciate it. And also, we can take this time if you want to think of questions. I know there are some that were emailed to me ahead of time, so I do have a couple.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, cool. Well, sure. We can start with the email questions if you want, Rachel.
Yeah. Well, there were a few that were pretty much addressed in your talk. I know someone
Okay,
wanted
great. Glad to hear
discussion
it.
about equine metabolic syndrome and kind of like what are the specific recommendations for that, or
Yep.
if there's any like nuance info.
Yeah, yeah, great question. Gosh, I could have done a whole talk on just that, I think. So some of the key considerations that I think about when I'm approaching a diet for a metabolic horse, first and foremostly, is carbohydrates, starches, and sugars, right? So our metabolic horses are sensitive to starch and sugar intake. That is, their bodies do not have a normal insulin response to starch and sugar, and then that has a whole cascade of issues down the line here. So the really key way that we're managing these horses through diet is by limiting starch and sugar intake. That can be hard in some cases, right? And I think if assuming most of you guys are from Northeast here, you probably are blessed with good pasture, just like I am here in Pennsylvania for the most part. And so sometimes these horses, we have to be really mindful about how much grass, what their pasture access looks like. Pasture grass tends to be quite a rich source of sugar, and that is not appropriate for these types of horses. So sometimes they either need to be, on restricted pasture access. That might be through a grazing muzzle or other strategies to limit pasture, like a track system, etc. Or they might have to be just kept on a dry lap. We also pay really close attention to the starch and sugar level of their hay, because hay will still have some type of NSC content, right? So if I've got a horse that we're really struggling to get under control through diet, I will always recommend a forage analysis. That includes a starch and sugar level. Through wet chemistry is the most accurate way to measure that, so that we can actually know. It's just more information to know, and then we can make an informed decision on whether that hay is appropriate for that horse. If it's not appropriate, what do we do? Many of our metabolic horses, I will pull off of grain or concentrates or ration balancers because they can be high in carbs or starch and sugar. I'll call them carbs. They can be high in carbs. There are many good low sugar concentrates out there. There are. But I'm really careful about incorporating how much I'm incorporating for that animal. And the other thing I think a lot of in a lot of cases with metabolic horses is they're also overweight. So not only are we pairing kind of our metabolic concern, but we're also maybe focusing on a weight loss diet too. So in that case, no grain is needed, right? They don't need the extra calories from a traditional concentrate. So they often do quite well on these forage-based diets, and then meeting vitamin and mineral needs with something like Omni-80 or Amino Trace Plus, to kind of fill in the gaps there. Um, so, so I would say, in summary, starch and sugar is my big thing that I am really strict on for those metabolic horses when I'm looking at diet.
Awesome. Well, that was very thorough.
Yeah.
I sure hope that person is satisfied. I am really glad that you brought up forage testing. Um, it's something that I do. So I get round
Yeah.
bales, I get batches of 12, and it's from the same farmer, but I don't know if it's always from the same field, and it's always different.
Right.
I
Right.
send in a forage analysis every time I get a batch. So
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to like briefly speak to the
Yeah.
benefit of just having that for any life stage of horse.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So forage analysis, I know it's not feasible or practical for everybody, but I think if whenever you are able to do it, it is such a great way to get more information, and it really allows us to better fine tune your horse's nutrition plan. Now, I think for the average horse who doesn't necessarily have any major concerns, can we get away with not testing the forage? Yeah, sure, of course. We do it all the time, right? But if we've got a horse with really specific concerns, like metabolic disease or growing horses, if you've got babies on the farm, gosh, do I want a forage analysis to know what protein looks like, right? If I've got horses, with other kind of concerns, maybe they're PSSM or HYPP, something like that, where I need to know some of that nitty gritty detail about their diet so that we can really make informed decisions. I mean, it's just a great tool, and it's really not a huge investment to do, by and large. So again, I know it's not feasible for everybody, especially for those of you who are in like boarding situations. Maybe the hay supply changes really frequently. That's okay. We can work around that in a lot of cases, but um, it's a really nice. I'm always excited to get a forage analysis because it just means I can really dive in a lot deeper.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, we do have a question in the chat. How can
Yeah.
we know when a horse has too much salt? I always worry a horse is getting too much.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say, um, I would say for the most part, you are not at risk of overdoing salt in an animal as large as a horse. So, I know we talk about that in humans a lot, where it's like careful of your sodium intake and hypertension and things like that. Really not a concern for our big animals like horses. So you're really not at risk for overdoing the salt. The worst that's going to happen is that they're going to drink more water and they're going to pee more. So I feel like that's never a bad thing. Um, Now I will I will sometimes have horses that are like really obsessive about salt. Like if you have like a salt block in their, stall or whatever, and they'll like chew on it or something. Like, okay, we can, that's probably not ideal, but again, it's not really a major health concern for them to get extra electrolyte. So good
Okay.
question though.
And this probably leads into this next question. And I get this one a lot.
Okay.
Is there any benefit from mineral blocks versus loose mineral versus
Hmm.
mineral bars? People are experimenting with that. Have you?
Yeah. Yeah, it's that's great. Yep. So, what I usually like to say when I'm prefacing supplementing salt in the diet is that I want to force the issue by adding salt to their meals, right? So I'll say add 1 to 2 tablespoons of salt right into their grain, just like you do all your other supplements, because that guarantees that the horse is actually going to consume what they need to meet their requirement. Offering free choice salt, whether it's loose or block or whatever, is still great. And I still encourage owners to do that because it's a good form of enrichment. It's there if the horse wants it. Again, there's not really a concern with them overdoing it unless they're like eating half of the salt block at a time or something silly. Um, so so that's kind of the first thing is there is just there's no guarantee that a horse will actually consume enough free choice salt on voluntarily to meet their daily requirement. So I would rather you force the issue, add a little salt to their meals each day. Now, as far as what, still offering free choice salt for enrichment, that's great. Which form is better versus another? There have been some studies to look at that, and I think sometimes, there's some research that shows like voluntary intake is higher if it's loose or like granular versus licking off of a block. There's some thought that horses just don't have the right tongue texture to actually like lick the blocks like a cow could or something. Um, so meh, for what, take it or leave it there. But I would say if you're already adding salt to their meals, I think it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other, whether you offer free choice salt or loose or block salt in their environment. Um, and then as far as whether it needs to be trace mineralized salt, so that just means, you can buy salt as just sodium chloride salt, or maybe it has some iodine in there, iodized salt, or it can be trace mineralized, so it'll have, some extra zinc and copper and selenium and cobalt, things like that. If your diet is already well balanced in vitamins and minerals, you don't need to pay up for trace mineralized block. You can just do a plain sodium chloride block. But it's not going to be harmful to have a trace mineralized block in the field, so that's fine too. That's my long-winded answer on salt. I'm passionate about it. All of us at Mad Barn are passionate about salt.
All
So
good. I met a person who just got a couple new horses, and they came with baggies of salt with their grain.
yeah,
Like, what do I do
that's
with this?
funny.
Like, you
Yeah,
feed
that's funny.
it.
Yep, yep.
But I think that's it for all the questions. Thank you so much, and thanks for
Fantastic.
providing the email there for folks to get a hold of you.